This console generation has been one of the worst console generations ever. So I've recorded this video and I've deleted it a bunch of times because this is a touchy subject and it's a subject that's probably going to piss people off, and I completely respect it. I keep thinking to myself, who am I to talk about this? I'm not the authority on any of this, but why not? Why not? Why not start the conversation here? In my opinion, this console generation has been one of the worst console generations ever. And you know, before we get into it, I really want to set the stage by saying I love video games. It's not a hobby to me, it's a passion. Like, I am deeply passionate about video games. In college, I took a job that paid very little because it let me write about video games, it let me talk about video games, and my passion led me to go to places like PAX East, PAX West, Comic-Con, even E3 before they were allowing the public in. I went to E3 as press, and it's something I'm really proud of because it's all driven through my passion for video games. So much so that I have a bunch of gaming tattoos on my body. And the reason I'm passionate about video games is because they've gotten me through some of the hardest moments of my life. Breakups, tragic deaths. They've been with me for every event in my life. There's birthdays that I could think back to, and instead of remembering what kind of cake or who was there, I remember the video games I played or the video game I got for my birthday. Christmases too. So I want to preface it by saying that this isn't me bashing on video games. This isn't me picking on video games. It genuinely comes from a place of love and concern because the industry isn't really going in a great direction. And the more I think about it and the older I get, the more I realize that it's okay and sometimes even necessary to be critical of the things you love, because that's the only way you'll see improvement, and that's the only way you'll be able to reflect. Parts of gaming that I refuse to even touch on, and not gaming itself, but like the community, and that's like the politics with the whole anti-woke crowd, which they don't deserve any amount of space in our conversations or in gaming. They're just grifters who care about pushing their own agendas, and they don't give a fuck about video games. Plain and simple. But yeah, let's now that I got that out the way, I want to jump into the PS5. When that came out, I felt like it came out too soon. I got one at launch. You'll see a picture. I'll put a picture somewhere here. Me and my daughter were extremely excited. It was all smiles. And look at the box. It says 4K, 120, capable of 8K, big lofty claims. And we know that wasn't the case. You know, almost immediately we knew that wasn't the case. At launch, I picked up Demon Souls and I picked up Miles Morales. Two great games. I love Demon Souls on the PS3. Of course, I was going to pick up the remaster. But neither one of those games felt like they were next gen. They didn't give me that feeling I got when I played games like Gears of War on the Xbox 360 or when I played Uncharted on the PS3. They didn't feel like next gen games. They felt like in between games, you know. And then we would get announcements of like God of War Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West, and those were also releasing on the PS4. They weren't PS5 exclusive, so it's like, oh, okay. In fact, what I think felt the most next gen about the PS5 was the DualSense controller, and Astral's Playroom. That, remember, it came bundled in. That was the most fun I had with a game at launch. And it's because it really showed off what the controller could do. That was the most next-gen feeling thing about the PS5 at launch. And I get it. When the PS5 came out, we were in the middle of a global pandemic. There was a chip shortage, so it was hard to get these consoles pumped out at a really fast rate. And if you're Sony, you can't isolate an established player base. The PS5 wasn't quickly adopted. There weren't enough. There just weren't enough PS5 to go around. So you can't isolate PS4 players. So I get that. And I understood it until they announced the PS5 Pro. That's when I was like, huh, the PS5 Pro sounds like a next gen console now. That sounds like a next gen experience. It's capable of doing some of the things that were on that box that the launch PS5 had, right? And it goes back to like this theory, and you can put on the tin hat. And my friends laugh all the time when I talk about it. I feel like the PS5 Pro was what the PS5 was supposed to be at launch. Part of my reasoning is like, the PS5 came out, one, to as a counter to the Xbox Series announcements, and two, people were bored at home and money was being spent on. I remember at the time it was retro gaming started like soaring. For a bit, it was hard to find a Nintendo Switch on store shelves. People were buying video games. People were buying entertainment. So Sony saw that and said, this is the right time. Let's take advantage of some of that money, right? And maybe that's far fetched, knowing how like consoles are developed and announced in advance. But it's my little theory. It's like they could have waited. Again, there were some games that felt like next gen games. Ratchet and Clank was one. Returnal, another one. But when I really sat there and I thought about it, I'm like, you could have reworked these games to come out on like the PS4, and maybe they couldn't. The Ratchet and Clank, I know the big one is that the SSD that the PS5 had allowed them to do things with the gameplay that wasn't possible on the PS4. And at the time, they said it wasn't possible on PC, but we saw that wasn't true. Right. Again, given what was going on at the time, it made sense. Sony didn't want to alienate a huge player base, but it also felt like it undercut the value of the PS5 a bit. Then there's Microsoft and the Xbox. If the PS5 feels underwhelming, I don't know what to think of the Xbox anymore. I feel like the Xbox has lost its identity. I saw the writing on the wall when they announced Xbox One. And I don't remember the guy's name, the executive's name at the time. His response to someone saying it's not a good thing that the Xbox needs to be online all the time. His response is like, well, just buy an Xbox 360 one. Someone said, what if you don't have internet? Why would you make an always online console? His response was buy a 360. That console could play offline games. And I don't know if folks remember, at the time, the Xbox One was being sold as a console that couldn't play used games, and that was alarming to me. And from then on, I've stuck to a Nintendo console, a Sony console, and my PC. And in hindsight, that was the right decision. So then you fast forward to now, and it looks like Microsoft is going all in with its Xbox Anywhere strategy. So much so that just a few days ago, Forza Horizon 5 got announced for the PS5 to a lot of uproar on the internet, and deservingly so. It sort of feels like folks that bought into the Xbox ecosystem are on an island. They've been isolated. It's like, why buy an Xbox if you could just buy a PS5 and a PC, or just stick to a PC and you'll get all the same games Xbox gets. There's no more Xbox exclusives. Maybe there will be. I can't say that. Maybe I should retract that. But that's how it feels right now. If Forza Horizon 5 is coming out on the PS5, what's to stop Microsoft from releasing the next Halo on the PS5? That's how folks are thinking now. And I get it. Consoles are expensive. People spent a lot of money on a brand, and that's why you buy consoles. Let's be honest. You buy a console for its exclusives. Nintendo consoles are relevant because of their exclusives. Saying anything else it's a little disingenuous. And it's not just Game Pass. Let's think about the launch and Halo Infinite. That game got delayed. That's supposed to be your flagship title. That's it's going to draw the gamers in. They delayed it by a year, and then at launch, it didn't have Forge. The season One pass felt like an extreme grind, and then there was no co-op multiplayer at launch, or multiplayer co-op at launch. And they never added the split screen multiplayer. And I won't really get into the Series S and X and how it holds the console back. There's things you could do to get around that, but it doesn't seem like Microsoft is really set on making hardware anymore. They're set on being a software company. Xbox, that is, the Xbox wing of Microsoft. And I think this is where the root of everything lies for Sony and for Microsoft, for the PlayStation brand, for the Xbox brand. The cost of game development has gotten ridiculous. When you have a game like Hi-Fi Rush that reviews so well, it's critically acclaimed between critics and players. Everyone's praising this game release, and it released on Game Pass. And I'm not going to dive into how Game Pass sort of undermines games, the sales of games in this video. I think that's another discussion, because that's a big discussion. But when a game like that releases, and then a year later it goes over to the PS5 and sells well, but not well enough, that it leads to a closure of a studio, that's a problem. When developers are more set and feel safer making remakes and remasters and are afraid to take risk and innovation and push towards innovation, that's a problem. This is all birthed from the extremely exorbitant cost of game development. Let's talk about Concord. It's rumored, I don't know if this is true, but it was reported that the game cost somewhere between $200 and $400 million to make. And it was a critical failure from the moment it launched. The reviews were lukewarm. I didn't hear a lot of great things about it. I personally didn't play it. I didn't care to play it. There was nothing interesting about it to me. And it released, lasted 2 weeks. Sony shut it down. And then days ago, we got news that Sony canceled something like 10 to 12 live service games. Yeah, that's a problem. That's a big problem. One of them being a God of War spinoff. Yeah, so yeah, that's a major problem in the industry right now. One flop could lead to the death of a studio. We've seen studio closures and it's a little crazy to me, because the industry has been extremely profitable in recent years, but you're still seeing studio closures. You're still seeing developers playing it super safe, and even again, not dogpiling on Sony, but we got The Last of Us 2, and 4 years later we get The Last of Us 2 remastered. That's disappointing, and it's a problem. And some of it stems from these games cost so much money, and you need to make your money back. You need there's investors involved, there's corporate suits involved now. It's not like the 16-bit era where people were making games for the love of it. People still do make games for the love of it, but they have to play extremely safe. You can't lose money. You can't swing and strike out. It has to be a hit, and I think that's led to the decline of games. We're not seeing games like a Katamari, like we saw on the PS2. We're not seeing a game like Pikmin, unless Nintendo makes it, and that's a different. We'll get into that in a minute. We're not seeing these weird, obscure games like Mr. Mosquito. Everyone's playing it safe. No one wants to release a game that flops and leads to people losing their jobs and the studio closing down. It's the truth. It's just the point blank truth, and I get it. And the human in me, I get it. So that's the big issue. That's the big issue where I've just been seeing the decline of gaming, and the more I look at it, I think, yeah, why would I want to make this risky, really innovative game that people might not like? Why would I take that shot if it could lead to the end of my studio? People losing jobs. I get it. And I think games as a service, the live service model isn't really working. Concord, good example of that. But I also think about Suicide Squad, and I think about Avengers is another one. And top of mind is Multiverse. I It's a shame, you know, especially yesterday they announced that this is it. The game is going to end soon after this next release, and they finally did the things that people wanted. But again, it doesn't seem like the live service games are working. I get it. It worked for Fortnite, it worked for Apex Legends, League of Legends, and Genshin Impact. But those feel like the exception, not the rule, you know. But again, these companies need to make their money back. They're trying to find creative ways to do it, but it's not working. And I know I get called a Nintendo fanboy a lot, and I get it. And it's funny because when I was younger, I hated Nintendo consoles, and after I became a dad, well, not hated, that's a strong word, but they weren't like, that's not where I usually went for gaming, you know. I think it started around the Wii, where I was like, it felt gimmicky. The Wii U, I started seeing where Nintendo wanted to go, and the 3DS, I've always loved it. And the Switch is where I really got hooked in, especially because the Switch came out around the same time that my daughter was born. And it was a great way to just pick something up, play, put it down without really having to focus all my energy onto it. So it kept me gaming while I was in like the early stages of dadhood, right? But even Nintendo has been playing it safe, you know? Think about Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. They're Zelda games in theory, and there are pieces of innovation there, but they take that whole open world concept and applied it to Zelda. And even if you look before that, and I think this is where Nintendo sort of does a good job. Look at Metroid Prime. They took everything that's functionally a Metroid game, right, and put it into a first person shooter. So it played it safe, but it still innovated that franchise. And we're seeing that even now with that small teaser we got with Bowser's Fury, where it sort of looks like the next Super Mario is probably going to be an open world game. Again, it's innovative for that series, but it's still playing it safe. They're taking the things that work from mainstream gaming. You know, it's not doing the things like, remember when we got Beautiful Joe, or when we got Pikmin, or when we got the Thrown for a Loop with Star Fox's Adventure, right? We're not seeing those types of games from Nintendo. We're seeing a lot of remasters from the Wii U, and we're seeing these games that sort of take the franchises in a different direction, but it's basically taking things that they know already work and throwing it into that franchise. And I can't sit here and act like it's all bad. The preservationist in me is extremely grateful for the remasters. I get to play some old games that are now unattainable due to how expensive they've gotten. Suikoden comes to mind. Lunar, that comes out later this year, that comes to mind also. The Legacy of Kain remasters. And I've had a lot of fun with video games. Astrobot, as of late, we platinumed it. Me and my daughters played through that. It was all smiles, all laughs. So it's not all doom and gloom. There's so much joy to still be found in gaming. It's just that I can't shake the feeling like the industry's become too big for its own good. And, you know, the creative spark that wants to find video games seems like it's getting a little dimmer. Where do we go from here? I personally don't know, but I'm rooting for games. That's it. Like, that's the truth. Like I said at the beginning, I love games. I'm always going to love them. And I always want it to be better. I want things to get better. I want games to push the envelope in terms of creativity. But what do you think? Is this the worst console generation? If not, tell me I'm wrong. Let's talk about it in the comments. What console generation sticks out to you as being the worst?